Hi everyone, welcome back to the shop. Exciting day today where I've finished the 4 panels, as you can see behind me. So that's build 1 out of the way. I think it's come up great, very happy with it. And today we're going to move on to build 2, which is going to be finishing off the carved centre poles for the longhouse. So I thought in this video I'll do a bit of an introduction on how I got to the point where they are now, and then we can pick it up and move on from there. So as I mentioned in the last video, it started with wanting to hide the wires and change to a more longhouse theme, and it all started with finding some pictures on the internet of a long haul recreation. I believe it's called Stickelstad is the place, and they've got some carved centre poles, or edge poles. They got a centre run with poles either side, and they had it carved in a similar style with a whole bunch of different creatures and animals all over it and painted. And it just struck me as being pretty awesome and something that I wanted to have a go at. So the first process was trying to recreate. Try to recreate the pole and the animals, and I had to go here on this side, and all the pictures I could find were all from the same direction, so I couldn't really make it complete and wrap around the pole. And then after getting a bit frustrated with that, I thought I'll just come up with my own style and creatures, which led me to this one over here. And so what I ended up doing was going with a household theme. So our household device has got a squirrel on it, and so there's a North squirrel called Ratatoska, and that squirrel runs up and down the tree of life, gossiping between the serpent at the bottom and the eagle at the top. So there are proper Norse names for all these animals, but I'm not going to butcher them on YouTube. But that's the general gist behind it. This was the only period-esque squirrel that we could find, and so I've kind of based it off of that, and that's allowed me to do the tree of life. Is all the branches in the background here. We've got the eagle at the top. Got a couple of squirrels running up the tree, and then the serpent down the bottom. Also on the tree of life are 4 stags which eat the leaves. So the plan for the second one is to do something similar to this. This one's only got 3, but I'll mix it up and put 4 on there, and that will become the second pole when I get around to it. So I decided on a pattern that I wanted. So then I had to get down to the practicalities of how to make it. So I already had centre poles for the tent, which were I think 70mm, 3-inch diameter, and so I didn't want to have these as the main structural element. I wanted them as a decorative bit on the outside, so I could not have to use them if I didn't want to, or just in order to get the tent up quickly, and then I could slide these on afterwards when we had more time. So the way I went about that, it was obviously going to be too heavy to have a solid log, so I've got a tree milled down to dimensional lumber, which I then use my table saw to cut the chamfer on, to then turn it back into a round log, but a hollow log. So you can see from here there's 10 pieces, all cut through the table saw and then glued together. The pieces were 2.4 long, and then the tent itself is closer to 3 meters at the peak. So I ended up making 3 whole poles, and then the third one I cut these portions off, which are to clamp on they go up on the top, up above there. So these upper pieces are actually left split into 2 pieces. And the way it works is the small centre pole is angled, slid out, and then the carved pole slides over the top, and the whole thing's stood up. Then we're left with a gap at the top, and these two half pieces just clamp around the outside. And the reason why I did this is because I've got the lights that I mentioned in the previous episode. So these are simply Christmas fairy lights, four of the individual LEDs soldered together, connected to some wire. So these can connect direct to 12 volt battery. And I've got a battery box with a switch. So what happens is there's some holes drilled up here, and the wires and the pipe is just slid in, and it's just a friction grip to hold it in place. And the way I made these, this is just 12mm copper water pipe, because I needed something hollow, and that comes up. And then this dish here is literally some galvanised sheet metal flashing that I had left over from a Renault, and it's not very neat on the inside, but you don't see that. It's all just spray painted, and it's up high, and it's just got a rolled edge and a dome to it with a hole. And then the copper pipe was just had 4 slits in it, and 2 of the bits were bent out this way, 2 were bent over on the inside after the metal dish was put on, and that just locks it in place with a bit of silicone in there. So it works quite well. I'll show you down the inside of the pipe here. So inside this, obviously the inside of this hole is bigger than the centre pole of the tent, so I've had to put in at the top and bottom, there's a plywood chunk of wood that goes in, and so that just helps locate the carved pole on the structural pole. And then inside here is also run just an old power lead with the ends exposed, and this is what I tie the batteries into. The batteries at one end and the lights at the other. So that's the mechanics behind it. In terms of the actual process for the carving, I transferred the image on, and then I cheated. I used a router to route down. So this is half the depth of the actual timber itself. So I routed out the big chunks, mostly where there's black currently, and then from then on everything else is hand carved with chisels. There's no other power tools once that was routed down. This was all hand planed to get it round, because they had, when it was joined together, it had bevels on all the joints. That's hand planed down, hand chiseled. And there was two Easters ago, 2 rowing festivals ago, I took it to the first event, and the plan was I ran out of time, but I didn't get it carved beforehand, and I took it down there, and the plan was to do a little bit of work down there before the event. And then I hadn't really thought about it, but there was a whole bunch of people interested in having a go at it, and it taught me a good lesson about having projects like this up and displayed are awesome, but if you can allow people to come in and actually participate in it and have a go, it's even better. Not everyone has the time or energy or money to do things like this, but people do appreciate being able to have a go. And they might just come in and have a couple of taps with the chisel, but they can say they've done a bit on it and feel proud about contributing to it. So it did take me a little while to get over my OCD and it not being done exactly how I wanted, but I think it's turned out better in the end, having people from all across the kingdom be able to come in and have a go and participate in it. And at the end of the day, it's pretty hard to stuff it up to the point where you can't fix it. So, and not that anyone got to that point, but it's you can always chisel a bit more off or cut out a chunk and glue another piece back in if it was that bad. But at the end of the day, it got over about a year and a half at the different events. It got chiseled to the point where it couldn't really do any more. It was just finishing work, and I wasn't I did want to do the finishing work myself, just to make sure it was neat and tidy, because there is a bit of skill involved. So you can't just hack into the timber with the chisel, otherwise you do rip out bits. So after it got to that point, that's where I spent a couple of weekends kneading it all up and making sure the lines were all right, and then I started painting. So I've covered the mixing of the paints in the previous episode. The green and the red were pre-mixed that I got off Des and Penny, that they had made up a couple of years ago. So I don't actually have the pigments to make them. I've got pre-mixed jars, and I got to a point I was getting pretty happy with it, and then my eye had the issues with my eye. Like I got to the point where I could only kind of see out of one eye, and then I kept making mistakes and dribbling paint, and anyway, I just kept making it worse than what it was, so I stopped, and that was about 3 months ago. So I'm back to the point now where my eye's good enough that I can actually see and not keep stuffing it up. So now's the time to finish it off. I've got most of the bulk colours in. White's only had one coat, it needs another couple. I need to touch up a few of the places where I've messed up a bit, but most of the colours on there, it's just tidying up now for that. There was plans to do carved in patterns, either lines or dots, but based on seeing how it looks here, I'm going to leave it like this for now and not do that extra detail. I can always come back and add that later if needed, but it's a lot of extra work and I think it'll make it a bit too busy, whereas I prefer this simpler finish. So the projects that I've got to do for maintenance and get this up to speed is, this is one of the, I've got two of these poles, the other one's just off to the side here, leaning up. So that one's just going to sit there. I will, when I get time before the next big event, try and get that second set of images on there so we can start doing some carving at events again. But the first job is the bit of pole that sits on top. This one's still good, it's in 2 halves, but I did have issues when I was gluing these up. Was a bit of a mission. So you've got 10 long bits of timber that you try and glue, and then you're trying to fold around without them all caving in on themselves, and then you're trying to strap them up and tighten them so they can go off. So I did have one where it all just kind of fell apart on me as I was doing it. So I ended up with my half circles having a weak joint. So what I need to do is glue these back together again, which is going to be a lot easier now that it's a little short piece. So first step, I'll turn the camera around and we'll get this one glued up, and then we'll go on from there. Okay, so we've got to glue these together. So I still want 2 half circles, so I've just got to glue this joint here and this joint, and then what we'll do, we'll wrap it in a complete circle, but with the straps, but there'll be no glue on these faces here, so it'll still stay as 2 halves. And spread some wood glue out. You do want a good coat on this so you get nice coverage. Always clean up the mess. It's all water based. Clean up. This says interior, but I'm pretty sure I've swapped this out. This is empty, been emptied before, and I've swapped it out with exterior grade glue. Although this, I try not to get these wet. But always better to have the exterior grade if possible, so that if any water or moisture or fog or whatever gets in, it doesn't all just fall apart. Now, because this is short, I'm going to actually stand it up and then drop the straps over it, which is a lot easier than what I had to do when I had the really long ones. actually got a weak joint here too, so I'm going to some glue down there. Balance that in there. That didn't work. Get that on to start with and reset it. I just want to make sure the glue, I don't care if the half joints are not glued, but not touching, but I need to make sure the glued ones are. And so you can see in here there's a big gap. It's just because I've got these ones here aren't giving it even pressure. So I'll just shift them around. So that's working a bit better. Well, I'm sure I could have made that more awkward, but I don't know how. So what I done, obviously when it all fell apart, the weak seam was along the full length of the 2.4 metre length. I glued them up and then tried to stick those halves together, but it was really two halves that were side by side on the round log. So when I tried to bring them together, they didn't quite actually meet as a full circle, and so I was slightly out, so I wasn't closing up. So what I had to do was grab the other half circle, so I had the wrong halves matched together basically. So once I did that, it joined together a lot better. There is still small openings on a lot of these joins, and that's because I ran it through my table saw, which wasn't the most accurate, and the timbers were a little bit bowed and whatnot to start with. So there's some little gaps in there, there's always going to be, but for the most part I've got that pretty well glued up. I'll come back when it's dry and plane off anything on the outside just to get that looking right. Yeah, I don't think I've got the patience to have ever been a Cooper. It's frustrating, but we're there now. So we've got that. So I'll leave this first video there. I just wanted to go through the process on how these were constructed to start with, and then what I'll do is pick up on the next one, and we'll be oiling and painting the main pole behind me. So I'll see you all in the next video.